It's a straight line to the answer.
Excellent, amphibian.
But on together.
This is your chance to put all could use a hero. Fighting is the point.
He's the best show in town.
Spider-Noir is a live-action television series that premiered on MGM Plus on May 25, 2026, before its global streaming debut on Prime Video on May 27, 2026, and the following text contains complete analyses and explanations of the entire film and series, examining every narrative thread, character arc, thematic concern, and stylistic choice that defines this remarkable production. Developed by Oren Uziel and Steve Lightfoot, and starring Nicolas Cage in his first leading television role, the 8-episode series represents one of the most audacious experiments in superhero storytelling in recent memory, and the following paragraphs will dissect every element of this bold creative endeavor. Unlike conventional Marvel adaptations, Spider-Noir is an R-rated period piece that blends detective noir, horror, and superhero elements into a singular vision of 1930s New York, creating a work that feels simultaneously nostalgic and radically new. Critics have described it as one of the most exciting and creatively fertile superhero works to be released in the last couple years, and the series holds a strong 90% tomato meter score on Rotten Tomatoes based on 40 critic reviews, signaling broad critical approval for its ambitious aims. The following exhaustive analysis will explore every facet of the production, from its narrative architecture to its visual grammar, its performances to its thematic preoccupations, its place within the larger Spider-Man mythos to its implications for the future of superhero storytelling. The series follows Ben Reilly, played with ferocious commitment by Nicolas Cage, a weary and down-on-his-luck private investigator navigating the mean streets of 1930s New York, a man who was once the city's only superhero known simply as the Spider. Following a deeply personal tragedy, specifically the murder of his partner, Reilly has retired from his vigilante life, attempting to live as an ordinary man running a small detective agency with his secretary Janet Ruiz, portrayed by Karen Rodriguez. The inciting incident arrives when a commission comes in to investigate Kat Hardy, played by Jun Li, a nightclub singer with dangerous ties to organized crime. A woman whose smoky voice and ambiguous morality immediately establish her as the quintessential femme fatale of the piece. Hardy is protected by mob boss Finbar Byrne, nicknamed Silvermane and portrayed by Brendan Gleeson with gravelly menace, and her mysterious movements and ulterior motives pull Riley into a tangled conspiracy involving corrupt officials, mob bosses, and a wave of organized crime threatening to consume the city. As Riley investigates, he discovers superpowered individuals connected to his past, including Flint Marko, also known as Sandman and played by Jack Houston, who is reimagined with horror-tinged abilities that owe more to Universal monsters than traditional comic book spectacle, and Lonnie Lincoln, also known as Tombstone and played by Abraham Papola, whose physical presence suggests menace in every frame. The narrative becomes increasingly personal as Riley is forced to confront the source of his powers, a horrific origin involving human experimentation and a mutated man-spider, bite that left him more arachnid than human, a trauma that the series refuses to soften or glamorize. The series draws on classic noir tropes including femme fatale, mob conspiracies, and moral ambiguity, while incorporating Universal monster-style horror elements that distinguish it from typical superhero fare, creating a hybrid genre that feels genuinely unprecedented in the landscape of comic book adaptations. Nicolas Cage delivers what critics have called a brilliantly unhinged performance as Ben Reilly, bringing to the role a quality of nervous energy and physical commitment that transforms what could have been a gimmick into something genuinely affecting and strange. This iteration of Spider-Man represents a radical departure from the traditional hero archetype, as Riley is described as a coward built with an innate desire to run away in the face of danger, a characterization that inverts the core premise of the Spider-Man mythos. His motto might be summarized as with no power comes no responsibility, yet his unconscious inability to ignore injustice forces him back into action repeatedly, suggesting that heroism is not a choice but a compulsion, a curse he cannot escape. The character's physicality is distinctive and meticulously crafted, with Cage rendering Riley as a naturally twitchy and lightly deranged fighter whose body movements resemble those of an actual spider, all jerky angles and unpredictable lunges that make his action sequences feel genuinely alien. Riley describes his powers as a condition rather than a gift, constantly fighting his urges to maintain a normal facade, and the series treats his enhanced abilities as a source of horror rather than wish fulfillment. His humanity is preserved through studying movies to remember what it was like to be ordinary, a metatextual element that Cage embraces with characteristic intensity, and this detail speaks to the series' larger meditation on performance, identity, and the impossibility of returning to innocence. Robbie Robertson, played by Lamorne Morris, serves as a determined reporter with the Bugle and Riley's best friend, a man willing to do whatever is necessary for his career as well as for Riley, and his presence grounds the series in the world of journalism and moral compromise that defines classic noir. Kat Hardy functions as the femme fatale figure, a nightclub singer with ties to the mafia whose motivations remain opaque until the final episodes, and the character is a reimagined version of Black Cat from the Spider-Man comics, stripped of her traditional costume and powers to become something more human and more dangerous. Silvermane, portrayed by Brendan Gleeson, is the gravelly-voiced mob boss who has a connection to Riley's past, a detail that the series withholds until a devastating reveal that reframes the entire narrative and deepens the tragedy at its core. Janet Ruiz, played by Karen Rodriguez, provides grounded support and dry commentary as Riley's secretary, serving as the audience surrogate who observes the madness of his world with a mixture of concern and weary acceptance. Flint Marko, also known as Sandman and played by Jack Houston, is reimagined as a tortured horror figure with abilities drawn from Universal Monsters iconography, his body literally crumbling and reforming in sequences that evoke the body horror of David Cronenberg more than traditional superhero spectacle. Lonnie Lincoln, also known as Tombstone and played by Abraham Papola, is portrayed as a World War I veteran seeking power and respect, his motivations rooted in the racial and economic injustices of the era rather than simple villainy. One of the most innovative aspects of Spider-Noir is its release strategy, as Prime Video offers the series in two formats, a standard color version and an authentic black and white version, a dual presentation unprecedented in television history that allows viewers to choose the experience that best suits the noir aesthetic. The black and white version is not simply a desaturated copy, but a carefully graded presentation that evokes the cinematography of classic noir films, with deep shadows, high contrast, and a silvery sheen that transforms the viewing experience entirely. The series is directed by a team including Harry Bradbeer, Zinga Stewart, Alethea Jones, and Greg Yataines, each bringing their own sensibility to individual episodes while maintaining a cohesive visual language across the season. Critics praise the shadow-drenched cinematography that hooks audiences from the first frame, and the series features a lady from Shanghai mirror-shattering showdown that explicitly pays homage to Orson Welles' noir masterpiece, signaling the production's deep engagement with the history of the genre. The show features a mid-season horror episode that recalls Mad Dr. B-movies, a stylistic detour that could have derailed the narrative, but instead deepens its thematic concerns about monstrosity and medical exploitation. Filming took place in Los Angeles under cinematographer Darren Tiernan, and the production design meticulously recreates the look and feel of 1930s New York, from the rain-slicked streets to the smoky interiors of nightclubs and detective offices. The show successfully combines classic film noir hallmarks including world-weary detectives, femme fatale, corruption, and moral ambiguity with superhero action and horror elements, creating a tonal balance that never tips too far into any single register. As one critic noted, it is to the benefit of Spider-Noir that Riley's identity as the Spider is not the most important part of its sweeping crime story, meaning that the series prioritizes its detective narrative over its superhero trappings, trusting the audience to remain engaged with the mystery rather than demanding constant action. The series finds the sweet spot between gritty noir and superhero spectacle, avoiding the gloom that comes with the noir genre through bombastic action scenes that release tension and remind viewers that this is, ultimately, a comic book adaptation. According to Rotten Tomatoes Review Roundup, critical reception is overwhelmingly positive, with praise directed toward the series' originality, performance quality, visual style, and genre authenticity. The series has been praised for standing out in an oversaturated superhero landscape, a significant achievement given the sheer volume of comic book content produced in recent years. Cage's work is described as pure delight, from his over-the-top physicality to the way he perfectly encapsulates the film noir era, and the performance represents a synthesis of his most memorable screen personas, part wild-eyed intensity, part deadpan comedy, part genuine pathos. The series is described as a bold experiment that breathes fresh, cynical life into a crowded superhero landscape, suggesting that its pessimism and moral complexity offer a welcome antidote to the earnestness of mainstream Marvel productions. The show channels its detective story ancestors with a self-conscious wink that oozes playful admiration, meaning that it is aware of its influences and invites the audience to share in that awareness, creating a layered viewing experience that rewards attention to genre history. Some detractors have found the series lacking in substance, with one variety critic calling it all style and very little substance, a criticism that suggests the aesthetic pleasures of the production may not compensate for what some perceive as narrative thinness. The Hollywood Reporter's Daniel Feinberg argued the story is frustratingly dull, cribbing the barest of bones from various vintage gumshoe dramas and adding precious little, a harsh assessment that nonetheless identifies a potential weakness in the series' reliance on familiar noir conventions. One critic noted the show fails to nail the decadence of true old Hollywood film noir, suggesting that the production's recreation of the period feels somehow inauthentic, perhaps too clean or too self-conscious to fully capture the gritty texture of classic noir cinema. The series explores surprisingly mature themes, with Riley's struggle to maintain his humanity against animalistic urges creating what critics call a brilliant thematic concept, one that literalizes the internal conflict that defines so many superhero narratives. The show deconstructs the idealized Marvel hero by contrasting who Riley believes he is with who people perceive him as, a gap between self-image and public perception that generates both comedy and tragedy throughout the season. The core emotions of Spider-Man, including guilt, responsibility, and loss, are woven into the web of this bizarre genre transplant, meaning that despite its radical departures from the source material, the series retains the emotional foundation that has made Spider-Man an enduring figure for decades. Spider-Noir is part of the Sony Pictures Spider-Man universe, a shared universe that has produced mixed results, but clearly offers creative freedom for experimental projects like this one. The series was announced in February 2023 as a joint production between MGM Plus and Prime Video, signaling a new era of collaboration between traditional cable networks and streaming platforms in bringing ambitious genre projects to audiences. Executive producers include Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, Amy Pascal, Adifir Sood, and Dan Shear, with Lord and Miller's involvement adding significant weight to the production given their proven track record with Spider-Verse animated films and other innovative projects. The series is developed by Oren Uziel and Steve Lightfoot, who serve as co-showrunners, and their creative partnership has produced a series with a distinctive voice that balances humor, horror, and genuine emotional stakes. The writing room includes Christopher Chun, Jennifer Frazen, Jack Henderson, Megan Liao, Bruce Marshall Romans, and Tori Sampson, a diverse group of writers who bring varied perspectives to the material and contribute to its rich texture. The writing has been described as dense with rat-a-tat dialogue that would come off as self-satisfied and overly constructed if it were not often so juicy and genre-authentic, a fine line that the series walks successfully for the most part. Cage previously voiced a version of Spider-Man Noir in the animated Spider-Man. Into the Spider-Verse, a beloved performance that established the character as a fan favorite and created anticipation for this live-action iteration. While showrunners have tried to clarify this is a different version of the character, the connection has been noted by critics and fans alike, and the series benefits from the affection audiences already feel for the animated iteration. The series represents a significant gamble that appears to have paid off critically, as by combining Nicolas Cage's gonzo intensity with classic film noir aesthetics and genuine horror elements, the production has created something genuinely unique in the superhero landscape. It may not be for everyone, as hardcore comic fans expecting a faithful adaptation may find it too far afield from the source material, but it demonstrates the versatility of superhero storytelling when creators are allowed to take genuine risks. The series proves that superhero storytelling can be versatile when creators are allowed to take genuine risks, a lesson that other studios would do well to heed as audience fatigue with formulaic content continues to grow. The first episode establishes the tone and visual language of the series with remarkable efficiency, introducing Ben Reilly in a state of decayed heroism that immediately signals the series' departure from traditional superhero narratives. The opening sequence depicts Reilly struggling with his spider-like urges, a physical manifestation of his internal conflict that Cage renders with unsettling precision, his body twitching and contorting as he fights to maintain control. The murder of his partner is revealed through fragmented flashbacks that withhold key details, creating a mystery that will not be fully resolved until the final episodes of the season. Janet Ruiz is introduced as a capable and perceptive woman who sees through Riley's gruff exterior to the wounded man beneath, and their relationship provides the emotional anchor that keeps the series grounded amidst its more fantastic elements. The commission to investigate Cat Hardy arrives through a classic noir device, a mysterious phone call that sets the plot in motion and plunges Riley back into a world he has tried to leave behind. Cat Hardy's introduction is a masterclass in noir character establishment, as she appears on stage in a smoky nightclub, her voice and presence immediately captivating both Riley and the audience. Her connection to Silvermane is established through subtle visual cues and whispered conversations, suggesting a complex relationship that will be explored throughout the season. The first encounter between Riley and Hardy crackles with tension and ambiguity, as each attempts to read the other while concealing their own motives, a dance of deception that defines their relationship through the entire series. Silvermane's introduction establishes him as a figure of immense power and menace, his gravelly voice and imposing physical presence making him a formidable antagonist even before his connection to Riley's past is revealed. The first episode ends with a revelation that recontextualizes everything that has come before, a narrative twist that demonstrates the series' commitment to genuine mystery and surprise. The second episode deepens the conspiracy narrative while expanding the supporting cast, introducing Robbie Robertson as a journalist whose investigation into organized crime intersects with Riley's case in unexpected ways. Robertson is portrayed as a man of principle who is nevertheless willing to compromise his ethics when necessary, a moral complexity that makes him a fitting companion for Riley in this morally ambiguous world. The episode introduces the horror elements more explicitly, with a sequence involving Flint Marko that draws heavily on body horror traditions and establishes the series' willingness to embrace uncomfortable imagery. Sandman's transformation is depicted as painful and terrifying rather than empowering, a departure from traditional superhero narratives that treat transformation as a form of wish fulfillment. The episode develops the relationship between Riley and Hardy, as their mutual suspicion gradually gives way to a wary alliance based on shared enemies and complementary goals. The third episode explores Riley's origin story through a series of flashbacks that reveal the horrifying circumstances of his transformation, depicting the human experimentation that gave him his powers as a violation rather than a gift. The mad scientist responsible for Riley's condition is introduced as a figure of genuine malevolence, his motivations rooted in scientific curiosity rather than any coherent ideology, making him terrifying in his amorality. The episode draws explicit parallels between Riley's condition and the universal monsters of classic horror cinema, positioning him as a creature of tragedy rather than a traditional superhero. Riley's struggle to maintain his humanity is depicted through his study of movies, a coping mechanism that allows him to access emotions that his condition has otherwise numbed. The episode features a confrontation between Riley and Sandman that is more horrifying than heroic, as both characters are revealed to be victims of the same cruel experimentation. The fourth episode functions as the season's horror centerpiece, a standalone narrative that recalls Mad Dr. B movies and pushes the series into genuinely disturbing territory. The episode takes place primarily in a single location, creating a claustrophobic atmosphere that intensifies the horror and forces the characters into close proximity with unspeakable things. The Mad Doctor figure returns, and his experiments are depicted with a visceral intensity that distinguishes this episode from the more conventional crime narrative of the surrounding episodes. Riley's physicality becomes more pronounced in this episode, as the horror of his condition is foreground and his struggle to maintain control becomes increasingly desperate. The episode ends with a revelation about the nature of Riley's powers that has implications for the rest of the season, deepening the mystery while raising the stakes. The fifth episode returns to the crime narrative while incorporating the consequences of the fourth episode's revelations, as Riley is forced to confront the truth about his condition and its implications for his identity. The relationship between Riley and Hardy reaches a new level of intimacy, as they share vulnerabilities and begin to trust one another in ways that will have significant consequences later in the season. Robertson's investigation reaches a breakthrough that puts him in danger, forcing Riley to choose between protecting his friend and pursuing his own case. Silvermane's connection to Riley's past is hinted at more explicitly, building toward the revelation that will come in the final episodes. The episode features an action sequence that demonstrates the series' ability to balance bombastic spectacle with genuine tension, as Riley's spider-like movements are rendered with a physicality that makes them feel dangerous and unpredictable. The sixth episode brings the various narrative threads together as the conspiracy becomes clearer and the stakes are raised to their highest point yet. The identity of the true villain is revealed, and it is a figure who has been present throughout the season in plain sight, a twist that rewards attentive viewers and demonstrates the series' commitment to fair play mystery construction. Riley is forced to confront the moral ambiguity of his own actions, as his methods are shown to have consequences that he cannot fully control or predict. Hardy's motivations are clarified, and her characterization deepens as the series reveals the trauma that has shaped her choices and the compromises she has made to survive. The episode ends with a cliffhanger that raises questions about Riley's survival and the fate of the city, setting up the final episodes for maximum tension. The seventh episode is the season's emotional climax, as Riley confronts Silvermane and learns the full truth about his past and the circumstances that led to his transformation. The confrontation between Cage and Gleeson is a highlight of the series, as two veteran actors bring decades of experience to a scene that crackles with intensity and subtext. The revelation about Silvermane's connection to Riley's past reframes the entire season, casting previous events in a new light and deepening the tragedy at the heart of the narrative. Riley's relationship with Hardy reaches a turning point, as she is forced to choose between her own survival and her feelings for him, a choice that has devastating consequences. The episode features a Lady from Shanghai mirror-shattering showdown that is both a visual spectacle and a thematic culmination, as the shattering glass represents the fragmentation of Riley's identity and the impossibility of returning to innocence. The eighth and final episode brings the season to a close with a series of confrontations and resolutions that feel earned rather than forced, as the various narrative threads are woven together into a satisfying conclusion. Riley's final confrontation with the true villain is both physically and emotionally exhausting, as he is forced to draw on resources he did not know he possessed. The fate of Hardy is resolved in a way that honors the character's complexity while providing closure for the romantic subplot. Robertson's role in the resolution demonstrates his importance to the narrative and his growth as a character over the course of the season. The final scenes depict Riley in a state of uncertain peace, as he has come to terms with his condition and accepted his role as the city's protector, even as he recognizes the costs of that role. The season ends with a note of ambiguity that leaves room for future seasons while providing sufficient closure for the current narrative. The series' approach to the Spider-Man mythology is both respectful and radically revisionist, as it retains the core emotional elements of the character, while stripping away the familiar trappings that have defined him across decades of adaptation. The name Ben Reilly is itself a nod to comic book history, as that name belongs to a clone of Peter Parker in the comics, a choice that signals the series' interest in questions of identity and authenticity. The absence of Peter Parker from this universe is notable, as it allows the series to explore the Spider-Man mythos without the burden of comparison to the more familiar iteration of the character. The series' treatment of superpowers as a curse rather than a gift is a significant departure from mainstream superhero narratives, which typically celebrate the acquisition of abilities as a form of empowerment. This inversion of expectations is central to the series' noir sensibility, as noir protagonists are typically defined by their flaws and limitations rather than their strengths. The visual style of the series is one of its most distinctive features, as the shadow-drenched cinematography creates an atmosphere of perpetual night that is essential to the noir aesthetic. The black-and-white version of the series is a particularly effective way to experience the visual storytelling, as it heightens the contrast between light and shadow that defines the noir genre. The period setting is rendered with meticulous attention to detail, from the costumes to the cars to the architecture of 1930s New York. The use of practical effects in the horror sequences gives them a tactile quality that digital effects often lack, making the body horror more visceral and disturbing. The action sequences are choreographed to emphasize Riley's arachnid physicality, with Cage's performance creating a sense of otherness that makes even simple movements feel alien. The sound design of the series is another element that deserves attention, as it contributes significantly to the atmosphere and emotional impact of the narrative. The jazz-influenced score evokes the period setting while adding contemporary sophistication, creating a sonic landscape that is both nostalgic and fresh. The use of silence in key moments creates tension that is more effective than any musical sting could be. The sound of Riley's movements is designed to emphasize his spider-like nature, with subtle clicking and skittering sounds that may not be consciously noticed, but contribute to the overall unease. The voice acting throughout the series is exceptional, with Cage's gravelly delivery perfectly suited to the hard-boiled dialogue and Jun Li's smoky vocals establishing Kat Hardy as a credible singer. The series' engagement with race and class in 1930s America is more sophisticated than many period pieces, as it acknowledges the realities of inequality without reducing characters to mere symbols of oppression. Robbie Robertson's experience as a black journalist in a white-dominated industry adds depth to his character and raises the stakes of his investigation. The treatment of immigrant communities in the series reflects the historical reality of 1930s New York, a city defined by its diversity and the tensions that diversity created. The economic desperation of the Great Depression is present throughout the series, as characters are motivated by survival as much as by ideology or morality. This attention to historical context grounds the fantastic elements of the series in a recognizable reality, making the supernatural horror more effective by contrast. The series' treatment of gender is similarly nuanced, as Kat Hardy is neither a simple victim nor a straightforward femme fatale, but a complex character whose choices are shaped by the limited options available to women in her era. Janet Ruiz is given agency and intelligence that make her more than a secretary sidekick, as her observations and interventions are often crucial to Riley's success. The absence of Mary Jane Watson or Gwen Stacy from the narrative is notable, as it allows the series to explore romantic dynamics without the weight of comic book continuity. The series' approach to sexuality is adult and honest, acknowledging desire without exploitation and treating intimate relationships with a maturity that is rare in superhero media. The philosophical questions raised by the series are as compelling as its narrative pleasures, as it explores the nature of identity, the possibility of redemption, and the meaning of heroism in a world that seems indifferent to human suffering. Riley's struggle to maintain his humanity against his arachnid nature literalizes the internal conflict that defines so many philosophical traditions, from Plato's tripartite soul to Freud's model of the psyche. The series suggests that heroism is not about the absence of fear or weakness, but about the choice to act despite them, a message that resonates far beyond the superhero genre. The noir framework allows the series to explore moral ambiguity without offering easy answers, as characters are rarely purely good or purely evil, but are instead defined by the compromises they make and the lines they refuse to cross. This moral complexity is a refreshing departure from the binary morality of much superhero media, and it positions Spider-Noir as a work of genuine artistic ambition. The influence of classic noir cinema is evident throughout the series, as it draws on the visual style, narrative conventions, and thematic concerns of films like The Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity, and Out of the Past. The series acknowledges these influences explicitly through visual homages and dialogue references, creating a conversation with the history of cinema that enriches the viewing experience for knowledgeable audiences. The horror elements draw on a different cinematic tradition, that of universal monsters and B-movie mad scientists, creating a hybrid genre that feels genuinely novel. The superhero elements are filtered through these other genres, so that even the most fantastic moments feel grounded in the gritty reality of the noir world. This synthesis of genres is the series' greatest achievement, as it creates a tone that is simultaneously familiar and unprecedented. The performance of Nicolas Cage has been the subject of extensive critical discussion, and it deserves particular attention in any analysis of the series. Cage brings to the role a quality of heightened reality that is perfectly suited to the noir genre, as his performances have always existed on the border between realism and expressionism. His physical commitment to the role is extraordinary, as he renders Riley's spider-like nature through subtle shifts in posture and movement that make the character feel genuinely other. The moments of comedy in his performance are as important as the moments of intensity, as they provide relief from the darkness of the narrative while deepening the characterization. His chemistry with Jun Li creates a romantic tension that is both sexy and sad, as both characters recognize the impossibility of their situation, even as they are drawn to one another. This is a performance that rewards close attention, as Cage layers his characterization with small choices that accumulate over the course of the season. The supporting cast is uniformly excellent, with Brendan Gleeson bringing gravitas and menace to Silvermane, Lamorne Morris providing warmth and wit as Robbie Robertson, and Karen Rodriguez grounding the series with her dry observations as Janet Ruiz. Jack Houston's Sandman is a figure of genuine pathos, as his monstrous appearance conceals a wounded humanity that the series explores with sensitivity. Abraham Papula's Tombstone is physically imposing and emotionally complex, as his desire for respect is portrayed as a legitimate response to the indignities he has suffered. The ensemble works together to create a world that feels populated by real people rather than archetypes, even when those people possess extraordinary abilities or occupy extreme moral positions. This attention to character detail is essential to the series' success, as it allows the audience to invest in the fates of these individuals, even as the plot takes increasingly dark turns. The production design deserves particular praise, as it creates a version of 1930s New York that is both historically grounded and stylistically heightened, a world that feels real but also somehow dreamlike. The detective agency where Riley works is rendered with a cluttered specificity that makes it feel lived in, from the overflowing ashtrays to the dusty files that line the walls. The nightclub where Kat Hardy performs is a masterpiece of period design, with its smoky atmosphere and Art Deco details creating an environment that is both glamorous and seedy. The laboratories where Riley was transformed are depicted as nightmarish spaces of medical horror, all gleaming instruments and shadowy corners that suggest unspeakable suffering. This attention to environment is essential to the noir genre, as the settings in noir fiction are not merely backdrops but active participants in the narrative, shaping the choices and fates of the characters who move through them. The series' soundtrack deserves mention as an essential element of its aesthetic achievement, as the jazz score creates a period-appropriate atmosphere while also contributing to the emotional register of individual scenes. The use of diegetic music, particularly Kat Hardy's performances, adds a layer of authenticity while also serving narrative functions, as the songs she performs often comment on the action or reveal aspects of her character. The sound mixing is subtle and effective, with ambient noise creating a sense of place and silence used strategically to heighten tension. The opening title sequence is a work of art in itself, establishing the tone and visual language of the series in a matter of seconds through a combination of imagery and music that perfectly encapsulates the noir aesthetic. These elements work together to create a total viewing experience that engages the senses and the intellect simultaneously. The series' place within the larger Sony Spider-Man universe is a subject of considerable interest, as it represents a departure from the interconnected storytelling that has defined superhero media in recent years. Rather than building toward a larger crossover, Spider-Noir tells a self-contained story that rewards attention on its own terms, suggesting a model for superhero television that prioritizes individual vision over franchise obligations. The involvement of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller as executive producers connects the series to the animated Spider-Verse films, which have been widely praised for their innovation and creativity. The decision to cast Nicolas Cage in the lead role was itself a statement of intent, as Cage's career has been defined by a willingness to take risks and embrace the unusual, qualities that are evident throughout this series. The commercial success or failure of Spider-Noir will likely influence the direction of future superhero productions, as studios watch closely to see whether audiences will embrace this kind of genre experimentation. The series' treatment of violence is notably more graphic than most superhero media, as the R rating allows for a level of brutality that emphasizes the real consequences of conflict. The violence in Spider-Noir is not glamorized or sanitized, but depicted as ugly and damaging, affecting both the perpetrators and the victims in lasting ways. This approach to violence is consistent with the noir tradition, which has always been willing to depict the darker aspects of human behavior without flinching. The horror elements of the series are similarly unflinching, as the body horror sequences depicting Sandman's transformation and the Mad Doctor's experiments are genuinely disturbing in ways that transcend typical genre expectations. This willingness to embrace discomfort is essential to the series' artistic project, as it forces the audience to confront the horror of the situations depicted rather than allowing them to remain at a safe distance. The series' exploration of trauma is one of its most sophisticated elements, as it depicts the lasting psychological effects of violence, loss, and violation without offering easy resolutions or simple catharsis. Riley's trauma is written into his body as well as his mind, as his spider-like condition is both a literal and metaphorical manifestation of his suffering. Hardy's trauma is revealed gradually over the course of the season, and her choices are shown to be shaped by experiences that have taught her to trust no one and to prioritize her own survival above all else. Robertson's position as a black journalist in a racist society is itself a form of ongoing trauma, as he navigates a world that constantly questions his competence and right to exist. The series treats these traumas with respect, refusing to suggest that they can be overcome through simple acts of heroism or that suffering inevitably leads to wisdom. The philosophical implications of the series extend beyond the realm of superhero storytelling, as it raises questions about the nature of free will, the possibility of moral action in an immoral world, and the relationship between self and other that are relevant to any thinking person. Riley's struggle against his arachnid nature can be read as an allegory for the human struggle against our own baser impulses, the constant effort to be better than we are. The noir framework suggests that this struggle is ultimately doomed, that we are all shaped by forces beyond our control. Yet the series also shows that the struggle itself has meaning, that the choice to fight is what defines us as human. This tension between determinism and agency is at the heart of the noir genre, and Spider-Noir explores it with unusual sophistication and emotional depth. The series' depiction of New York City is itself a character in the narrative, as the city's geography, architecture, and social dynamics shape the story in countless ways. The contrast between the glamorous world of the nightclubs and the poverty of the streets is a constant presence, reminding viewers of the economic inequalities that define the era and continue to define our own. The city's diversity is depicted with historical accuracy, as characters from different ethnic and racial backgrounds interact in ways that reflect the realities of 1930s New York. The political corruption that pervades the series is shown to be systemic rather than individual, as the institutions that should protect citizens are revealed to be compromised by self-interest and greed. This attention to social context gives the series a relevance that transcends its period setting, as the issues it explores remain pressing in our own time. The series' approach to adaptation is notable for its willingness to depart from the source material while retaining its essential spirit, a balance that many adaptations fail to achieve. The characters of Spider-Man, Black Cat, Sandman, and Tombstone are recognizable but transformed, their familiar elements reconfigured to serve the noir aesthetic and the series' thematic concerns. The absence of certain iconic elements, such as the red and blue costume and the web shooters, is a bold choice that signals the series' independence from comic book convention. The result is an adaptation that feels both faithful and free, honoring the legacy of the source material while creating something genuinely new. This approach to adaptation offers a model for future superhero productions, suggesting that the most interesting adaptations are those willing to take risks rather than those that simply reproduce familiar elements. The series' 8-episode structure allows for a pace that is both deliberate and propulsive, as each episode advances the plot while also providing space for character development and thematic exploration. The decision to release the entire season at once on Prime Video encourages binge-watching, and the series is structured to reward this mode of consumption, with cliffhangers that create momentum and revelations that reframe earlier events. The dual-format release is an innovation that other productions would do well to emulate, as it acknowledges that different viewers have different aesthetic preferences and that a single presentation cannot serve all audiences equally. The black-and-white version is not a gimmick but a legitimate alternative that offers a different viewing experience, one that is arguably more authentic to the noir tradition. The critical reception of Spider-Noir has been largely positive, with most reviewers praising the series' ambition, visual style, and Cage's performance, while some have criticized its pacing, narrative coherence, and reliance on genre conventions. The tension between these perspectives reflects the series' fundamental nature as a hybrid work, one that will inevitably appeal more to some viewers than to others. The positive reviews tend to emphasize the series' originality and willingness to take risks, while the negative reviews tend to focus on its perceived lack of substance or its failure to fully transcend its influences. Both perspectives have validity, and the truth likely lies somewhere in between, as the series is neither the masterpiece that some have claimed nor the failure that others have dismissed it as. The implications of Spider-Noir for the future of superhero media are significant, as it demonstrates that the genre can accommodate a wide range of tones, styles, and thematic concerns beyond the familiar formula of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The series' success, both critical and commercial, sends a message to studios that audiences are willing to embrace experimental approaches to familiar properties, provided that those approaches are executed with skill and conviction. The R rating is itself significant, as it allows for a level of adult content that is rare in superhero media, suggesting that there is an audience for mature stories within the genre. The involvement of major stars like Nicolas Cage signals that superhero projects can attract serious acting talent when the material justifies their participation. These factors suggest that Spider-Noir may prove to be a turning point in the evolution of superhero storytelling, opening doors for future projects that embrace risk and innovation over formula. The series' treatment of the Spider-Man mythos raises interesting questions about the nature of heroism and the possibility of redemption, questions that have animated the character since his creation in 1962. The original Spider-Man was notable for his youth and relatability, as Peter Parker was a teenager dealing with ordinary problems while also fighting extraordinary villains. Spider-Noir's Ben Reilly is older, more damaged, and less idealistic, reflecting the noir tradition's emphasis on weariness and disillusionment. The series suggests that heroism is not the exclusive province of the young and optimistic, that even the most damaged individuals can choose to act for the good of others. This message is particularly resonant in an era when cynicism and despair often seem overwhelming, and it gives the series an emotional weight that transcends its genre origins. The series' depiction of romance is notably adult and complex, as the relationship between Riley and Hardy is characterized by mutual suspicion, gradual trust, and ultimately sacrifice. Their dynamic evokes the great romantic pairings of classic noir, couples whose love is impossible or doomed but nonetheless profound. The chemistry between Cage and Jun Li is essential to the success of this relationship, as they convey attraction and wariness through glances and silences rather than declarations. The series does not provide easy resolution for this relationship, recognizing that the noir world is one in which happiness is rarely achieved and love is often a source of pain rather than comfort. This treatment of romance is consistent with the series' overall approach, which prioritizes complexity and honesty over wish fulfillment and sentimentality. The series' use of voiceover narration is a key element of its noir aesthetic, as Riley's gravelly interior monologue provides context and commentary while evoking the classic detective films that inspired the production. The narration is written with a hard-boiled poetry that is both period-appropriate and surprisingly contemporary, as it balances tough guy posturing with genuine vulnerability. Cage's delivery of the narration is masterful, as he modulates his voice to convey weariness, anger, longing, and dark humor in equal measure. The narration allows the series to access Riley's interiority in ways that would be difficult through dialogue alone, giving the audience insight into his thoughts and feelings that deepens the characterization. This use of voiceover is a risky choice, as it can easily become pretentious or distracting, but the series executes it with such confidence and skill that it becomes an essential element of the viewing experience. The series' treatment of corruption is both specific and universal, as it depicts the particular forms that corruption took in 1930s New York, while also exploring the timeless dynamics of power, greed, and institutional failure. The political machine that controls the city is shown to be thoroughly compromised, as officials at every level are revealed to be in the pockets of organized crime. The police force is similarly corrupt, as officers who should protect the public are instead shown to be enforcers for the mob. This depiction of corruption is grounded in historical reality, as the era was defined by widespread political corruption and the growing power of organized crime. The series suggests that this corruption is not an aberration, but a fundamental feature of urban life, a message that remains relevant in our own era of corporate influence and political dysfunction. The series' ending is likely to be a subject of debate among viewers, as it provides closure for some narrative threads while leaving others deliberately unresolved. And this analysis will therefore avoid revealing specific details for those who have not yet experienced the story themselves. What can be said is that the ending is consistent with the series' overall approach, as it refuses to provide easy answers or false reassurance, instead leaving the characters in a state of uncertainty that reflects the noir tradition's skepticism about happy endings. The final images of the series are likely to linger in viewers' minds, as they encapsulate the themes of identity, trauma, and uncertain hope that have defined the narrative throughout. The series' willingness to end on a note of ambiguity is a sign of its confidence and maturity, as it trusts the audience to sit with uncertainty rather than demanding closure. This ending is likely to generate discussion and debate, which is itself a sign of the series' success in creating a work that engages the intellect and the emotions. In conclusion, Spider-Noir represents a significant achievement in superhero television, as it demonstrates that the genre can accommodate serious artistic ambition while still providing the pleasures that audiences expect from comic book adaptations. The series' synthesis of noir, horror, and superhero elements creates something genuinely new, a hybrid genre that feels both familiar and unprecedented. Nicolas Cage's performance as Ben Reilly is a career highlight, as he brings to the role a combination of physical commitment, emotional depth, and dark humor that elevates the material significantly. The supporting cast is uniformly excellent, the production design and cinematography are outstanding, and the writing is sharp and sophisticated. While the series is not without flaws, particularly in its pacing and its reliance on genre conventions, these flaws do not significantly diminish its achievements. Spider-Noir is a bold experiment that largely succeeds, and it offers a model for future superhero productions that are willing to take genuine risks in pursuit of artistic innovation. The legacy of Spider-Noir is likely to extend beyond its immediate reception, as it demonstrates the creative possibilities of the superhero genre when creators are freed from the constraints of formula and given the freedom to explore unconventional approaches. The series' dual-format release may prove influential, as other productions may follow its example in offering audiences multiple ways to experience their stories. Its success may encourage studios to invest in other period superhero stories, particularly those that draw on different cinematic traditions beyond the familiar action-adventure template. The casting of Nicolas Cage in a leading role may also prove significant, as it demonstrates that veteran actors can bring new dimensions to superhero characters when given the opportunity. These potential influences suggest that Spider-Noir is not merely an interesting experiment, but a potentially transformative work that could shape the future of superhero media in meaningful ways. The series' engagement with the history of cinema is one of its most intellectually rewarding aspects, as it invites knowledgeable viewers to recognize its influences and appreciate its innovations in relation to the traditions it draws upon. The references to classic noir films are not mere Easter eggs, but meaningful engagements with the themes and techniques of those earlier works, creating a dialogue between past and present that enriches both. The horror elements similarly draw on a rich tradition of monster movies and mad scientist films, reinterpreting those conventions for a contemporary audience while honoring their original power. This intertextuality is a hallmark of sophisticated genre work, and it positions Spider-Noir as a work that rewards repeated viewing and close attention. The series is not merely entertainment, but a contribution to an ongoing artistic conversation, one that spans decades of cinema history and continues to evolve with each new work that engages with the tradition. The emotional impact of Spider-Noir is considerable, as the series earns its moments of pathos through careful character development and narrative investment, refusing to manipulate the audience with cheap sentiment. The relationship between Riley and Robertson is particularly affecting, as their friendship is tested by the dangers they face and the compromises they are forced to make. The tragedy of Hardy's situation is deeply felt, as the series makes clear that her choices are constrained by forces beyond her control, and that her apparent coldness is a survival mechanism rather than a true reflection of her character. The horror of Riley's condition is rendered with such conviction that viewers may find themselves feeling genuine sympathy for a character who is, by any reasonable measure, a monster. This emotional complexity is the series' greatest strength, as it creates a viewing experience that is both intellectually stimulating and emotionally moving. The series' treatment of identity is particularly sophisticated, as it explores the ways in which our sense of self is shaped by our bodies, our histories, and the perceptions of others. Riley's struggle to reconcile his human and arachnid natures is a literalization of a universal human experience, as we all must navigate the gap between who we feel ourselves to be and who others perceive us to be. The series suggests that identity is not fixed but fluid, constantly renegotiated through our actions and relationships. This philosophical dimension gives the series a depth that distinguishes it from more conventional superhero narratives, which often treat identity as a matter of choosing between two pre-existing options. Spider-Noir instead suggests that identity is an ongoing process of creation, one that is never complete and always subject to revision. The series' treatment of power is similarly nuanced, as it explores the corrupting influence of power while also acknowledging that powerlessness can be equally deforming. Silvermane's power has made him paranoid and cruel, but the powerlessness of the city's poor has driven many to desperation and crime. Riley's powers are a source of both strength and suffering, as they enable him to fight injustice while also alienating him from his own humanity. The series suggests that power is neither inherently good nor evil, but is instead shaped by the choices of those who wield it, a message that is both sobering and hopeful. This treatment of power is consistent with the noir tradition, which has always been skeptical of authority while recognizing the necessity of action in the face of injustice. The final paragraphs of this analysis must acknowledge that Spider-Noir is a work that defies easy summary or categorization, as its richness and complexity resist reduction to simple statements or judgments. It is a series that rewards patient viewing and close attention, as its layers of meaning reveal themselves gradually over the course of its 8 episodes. It is a work that respects its audience, trusting viewers to engage with ambiguity and complexity rather than demanding clarity and resolution. It is a series that takes risks, and those risks largely pay off, resulting in a viewing experience that is genuinely distinctive in the landscape of contemporary television. For these reasons, Spider-Noir deserves to be recognized as one of the most significant superhero productions of its era, a work that expands the possibilities of the genre and offers a model for future creators to follow. As the final word in this comprehensive analysis, it is worth noting that Spider-Noir arrives at a moment when superhero media is facing increasing criticism for its homogeneity and risk aversion, and the series offers a compelling alternative to those tendencies. By embracing the noir tradition's emphasis on moral ambiguity, psychological complexity, and visual stylization, the series demonstrates that superhero stories can be vehicles for serious artistic expression. By casting Nicolas Cage in a role that fully utilizes his distinctive talents, the series proves that great performances can elevate genre material to the level of art. By taking genuine risks with its tone, structure, and presentation, The series shows that audiences are willing to embrace innovation when it is executed with conviction and skill. These are lessons that the entertainment industry would do well to heed, as the future of superhero media depends on the willingness of creators and studios to push beyond formula and embrace the full range of possibilities that the genre affords. Spider-Noir is not just an excellent series. It is a proof of concept for a more ambitious and diverse future for superhero storytelling. Spider-Noir is a live-action television series that premiered on MGM Plus on May 25, 2026, before its global streaming debut on Prime Video on May 27, 2026, and the following text contains complete analyses and explanations of the entire film and series, examining every narrative thread, character arc, thematic concern, and stylistic choice that defines this remarkable production. The series represents a fundamental challenge to the established conventions of superhero storytelling, refusing to offer the comforting certainties that have come to define the genre in the 21st century. Developed by Oren Uziel and Steve Lightfoot, the 8-episode series demonstrates an extraordinary commitment to its artistic vision, never wavering from its bleak yet strangely beautiful aesthetic. Nicolas Cage delivers a career-defining performance as Ben Reilly, investing the character with a depth and strangeness that transcends the typical boundaries of comic book adaptation. The production design meticulously recreates the world of 1930s New York, from the rain-slicked cobblestones to the smoky interiors of illegal speakeasies. The series' commitment to historical accuracy extends beyond mere visual detail, encompassing the social dynamics, political corruption, and economic desperation that defined the Great Depression era. Every frame of the series feels carefully considered, as though the creators understood that they were crafting something genuinely unprecedented in the superhero landscape. The critical acclaim that greeted the series upon release was not merely a reflection of its novelty, but a recognition of its genuine artistic achievement. The following paragraphs will explore every dimension of this extraordinary production, offering insights into its narrative construction, character development, thematic preoccupations, and cultural significance. This analysis seeks to illuminate the ways in which Spider-Noir transcends its genre origins to become something approaching art, while also acknowledging the limitations and contradictions that prevent it from achieving perfection. The series occupies a unique position within the Sony Spider-Man universe, functioning both as a standalone work and as a commentary on the larger mythology from which it emerges. The decision to set the series in the 1930s was itself a radical choice, as it allowed the creators to explore the origins of the superhero genre while simultaneously deconstructing its conventions. The result is a work that feels simultaneously timeless and urgently contemporary, addressing concerns that resonate across decades and speak to our present moment. The narrative architecture of Spider-Noir is constructed with extraordinary care, as each episode builds upon the previous one while introducing new elements that complicate and deepen the central mystery. The first episode establishes the world and its rules with remarkable efficiency, introducing Ben Reilly as a man haunted by his past and uncertain about his future. The audience learns through carefully deployed flashbacks that Reilly was once a hero, a figure known as the Spider who protected the innocent and fought against injustice. The murder of his partner serves as the inciting trauma that drove him into retirement, and the series refuses to reveal the full circumstances of this death until late in the season. This withholding of information creates a narrative tension that sustains viewer interest across all 8 episodes, as each new revelation recontextualizes everything that has come before. The investigation into Cat Hardy provides the immediate motivation for Reilly's return to action, but the series makes clear that this return was inevitable, that his retreat from heroism was always unsustainable. The conspiracy that unfolds is appropriately labyrinthine, involving corrupt politicians, brutal mob bosses, and shadowy figures whose motivations remain opaque until the final episodes. The pacing is deliberate without ever feeling sluggish, as each episode contains enough incident to keep the audience engaged while allowing space for character development and thematic exploration. The series respects the intelligence of its audience, trusting viewers to follow complex plot developments without excessive exposition or hand-holding. The final episodes bring the various narrative threads together in a conclusion that feels earned rather than arbitrary, as the seeds planted early in the season bear fruit in satisfying and surprising ways. The resolution honors the noir tradition by refusing to provide easy answers or uncomplicated happy endings, instead leaving characters in states of uncertainty that reflect the moral complexity of the world they inhabit. The character of Ben Reilly represents one of the most radical reinterpretations of Spider-Man ever attempted, as the series strips away the familiar elements of the character to reveal something stranger and more disturbing beneath. Unlike Peter Parker, who became Spider-Man as a teenager and learned to balance his heroic responsibilities with the ordinary challenges of adolescence, Reilly was transformed as an adult and has never fully reconciled himself to his condition. His powers are depicted not as gifts but as symptoms of a fundamental violation, the result of experiments that treated him as an object rather than a person. The series draws explicit parallels between Reilly's transformation and the experience of trauma, suggesting that his arachnid abilities are a physical manifestation of psychological wounds that will never fully heal. Cage's performance emphasizes the twitchy, anxious quality of a man who is never entirely comfortable in his own body, whose movements suggest a constant struggle against impulses he cannot fully control. The voiceover narration reveals a mind that is sharp, self-aware, and deeply weary, a consciousness that has seen too much and expects the worst from the world. Reilly's humor is dark and self-deprecating, a defense mechanism that protects him from the full weight of his despair. His relationships with other characters are characterized by a wariness that reflects his fundamental distrust of intimacy, born from the knowledge that everyone he loves will eventually be taken from him. The series suggests that Reilly continues to fight not because he believes in justice, but because he cannot help himself, that his heroism is a compulsion rather than a choice. This characterization inverts the traditional Spider-Man narrative, replacing the inspirational message of responsibility with a more pessimistic vision of heroism as an incurable condition. Kat Hardy emerges as one of the most compelling characters in the series, a femme fatale whose complexity far exceeds the archetype she initially appears to embody. Jun Li brings to the role a smoky sensuality and emotional depth that make Hardy simultaneously alluring and tragic, a woman whose beauty masks a lifetime of suffering and survival. The series reveals her backstory gradually, allowing the audience to understand the circumstances that shaped her choices without excusing the choices themselves. Her relationship with Silvermane is depicted as a necessary alliance born of desperation rather than genuine loyalty, a survival strategy that has cost her dearly in ways that become clear over the course of the season. The romantic tension between Hardy and Reilly is electric, as two damaged individuals recognize in each other a shared capacity for darkness and a mutual longing for something better. Their scenes together crackle with unspoken desire and mutual suspicion, as each attempts to determine whether the other can be trusted while simultaneously revealing their own vulnerabilities. The series refuses to resolve this tension in a conventional manner, instead allowing their relationship to evolve in ways that are unpredictable and emotionally devastating. Hardy's ultimate fate is handled with a dignity that honors the character's complexity, avoiding the punitive moralism that often characterizes the treatment of femme fatale figures. The character represents a significant achievement in the representation of women in superhero media, as she is neither a damsel in distress nor a simplistic villain, but a fully realized person whose choices are shaped by forces beyond her control. The supporting cast of Spider-Noir deserves extensive analysis, as each character contributes to the richness of the world and the complexity of the central narrative. Robbie Robertson, played by Lamorne Morris, serves as Reilly's moral anchor and closest friend, a man whose own struggles with racism and professional marginalization give him a perspective that complements Reilly's more personal battles. Morris brings warmth and humor to the role, providing relief from the darkness while never undermining the seriousness of the character's circumstances. Janet Ruiz, portrayed by Karen Rodriguez, functions as the audience surrogate, her dry observations and practical wisdom grounding the more fantastic elements of the narrative. Flint Marko, also known as Sandman, is reimagined as a horror figure whose condition is both terrifying and pitiable, as Jack Houston conveys the anguish beneath the monster's exterior. Lonnie Lincoln, also known as Tombstone, represents the tragic consequences of systemic racism and economic inequality, as Abraham Papoula portrays him as a man whose pursuit of power is a response to a lifetime of powerlessness. Silvermane, played by Brendan Gleeson, is a villain of Shakespearean proportions, his gravelly voice and imposing presence conveying authority, while his actions reveal the paranoia and cruelty that power has cultivated in him. The ensemble works together to create a world that feels populated by real people rather than mere archetypes, each character carrying their own history and motivations that inform their actions throughout the narrative. The visual style of Spider-Noir constitutes one of its most significant achievements, as the series creates a coherent aesthetic that synthesizes multiple cinematic traditions into something genuinely distinctive. The cinematography by Darren Tiernan employs deep shadows and dramatic contrasts that evoke the work of classic noir directors like John Alton and Nicolas Cage. The black-and-white version of the series is particularly effective in this regard, as the absence of color heightens the sense of moral ambiguity and existential dread that defines the narrative. The production design recreates 1930s New York with meticulous attention to detail, from the period-appropriate signage to the authentic costumes that reflect the class distinctions of the era. The series makes effective use of locations, transforming Los Angeles into a convincing stand-in for Depression-era New York through careful set decoration and atmospheric lighting. The horror sequences employ practical effects whenever possible, giving the body horror a tactile quality that digital effects cannot replicate. The action scenes are choreographed to emphasize Riley's unnatural movement patterns, with Cage's physical performance creating a sense of otherness that makes even simple actions feel alien. The series' visual language consistently reinforces its thematic concerns, using shadow to represent moral ambiguity and light to suggest moments of clarity or hope. This integration of form and content elevates Spider-Noir beyond mere entertainment, creating a work that engages the eye and the intellect simultaneously. The thematic depth of Spider-Noir distinguishes it from most superhero media, as the series engages seriously with questions that have occupied philosophers and artists for centuries. The nature of identity is explored through Riley's struggle to reconcile his human and arachnid aspects, a conflict that literalizes the universal human experience of feeling divided within oneself. The series suggests that identity is not a fixed essence but an ongoing process of negotiation, shaped by our actions, our relationships, and the stories we tell about ourselves. The problem of free will is addressed through Riley's compulsive heroism, which raises the question of whether his choices are genuinely free or merely the expression of an innate nature he cannot escape. The possibility of redemption is examined through multiple characters, each of whom has committed acts that might seem unforgivable, but who nonetheless seek some form of absolution. The series refuses to provide easy answers to these questions, instead allowing the complexity of the issues to remain unresolved. The relationship between power and corruption is explored through Silvermane and the political machine he controls, as the series demonstrates how the pursuit of power inevitably deforms those who achieve it. The experience of marginalization is depicted through Robertson and Tombstone, whose struggles against racism reflect the broader injustices of the era while remaining specific to their individual circumstances. These themes are woven throughout the narrative, emerging organically from the characters and situations rather than being imposed from without. The series' engagement with the history of cinema constitutes another layer of meaning, as it explicitly and implicitly references the films that have shaped its aesthetic and thematic concerns. The influence of Orson Welles is evident in the deep-focused cinematography and the moral complexity of the central characters, while the ghost of Humphrey Bogart haunts Cage's performance as a man who has seen too much and expects the worst. The horror elements draw on the tradition of universal monsters, particularly the sympathetic treatment of creatures who are more victims than villains. The series also engages with the tradition of film noir, which emerged in the 1940s as a response to the disillusionment of the post-war era, a genre defined by its skepticism toward authority and its recognition of moral complexity. The explicit homage to the lady from Shanghai in one of the season's key sequences demonstrates the creator's deep knowledge of and respect for the noir tradition. This intertextuality enriches the viewing experience for knowledgeable audiences, creating a dialogue between past and present that adds depth to the narrative. The series is not merely imitating its influences, but engaging with them critically, using the conventions of earlier works to comment on the present moment. The sound design of Spider-Noir is an essential element of its aesthetic achievement, creating an auditory environment that complements and enhances the visual storytelling. The jazz score, composed specifically for the series, evokes the period setting while incorporating contemporary elements that prevent it from feeling merely nostalgic. The use of diegetic music, particularly Cat Hardy's performances in the nightclub, grounds the series in a specific time and place, while also serving narrative functions. The ambient sound of the city, The distant traffic, the clatter of elevated trains, the murmur of crowds, creates a sense of place that is essential to the noir aesthetic. The sound of Riley's movements is subtly altered to suggest his arachnid nature, with small clicks and rustles that might escape conscious notice but contribute to the overall unease. The absence of sound in key moments is equally important, as silence becomes a tool for creating tension and emphasizing the gravity of certain revelations. The voiceover narration is mixed in a way that makes it feel intimate, as though the audience is privileged to access Riley's private thoughts. This attention to sound design demonstrates the series' commitment to total craft, treating every element of the production as essential to the overall effect. The series' treatment of violence is notably mature, as it depicts the consequences of physical conflict with a frankness that is rare in superhero media. The violence in Spider-Noir is not glamorized or sanitized, but shown as ugly, painful, and often futile, leaving lasting damage on both the perpetrators and the victims. This approach is consistent with the noir tradition, which has always been willing to confront the darker aspects of human existence without flinching. The horror elements push this frankness further, depicting bodily transformation and medical experimentation in ways that are genuinely disturbing. The series does not use violence gratuitously, but employs it strategically, ensuring that each instance serves the narrative and thematic purposes. The R rating allows for this mature treatment, and the series uses this freedom responsibly, never indulging in violence for its own sake. The result is a work that treats its subject matter with appropriate seriousness, recognizing that the stakes of the story demand a corresponding weight in its depiction of physical conflict. The philosophical implications of the series extend into questions of ethics and morality that are rarely addressed in mainstream entertainment. The series asks whether it is possible to act morally in a fundamentally immoral world, whether individual heroism can make a difference in the face of systemic corruption. The answer it provides is ambiguous, as Riley's actions do achieve some limited successes while failing to address the underlying conditions that create injustice. The series also explores the ethics of vigilantism, questioning whether individuals have the right to take the law into their own hands even when the law is demonstrably corrupt. This question is particularly relevant in an era when trust in institutions has declined dramatically, and the series refuses to provide a simple answer. The relationship between ends and means is examined through the choices of multiple characters, each of whom justifies their actions by reference to the goals they seek to achieve. The series suggests that such justifications are always suspect, that the means inevitably shape the ends in ways that cannot be predicted or controlled. These ethical questions give the series a seriousness that distinguishes it from more conventional superhero entertainment. The cultural context of Spider-Noir is significant, as the series arrives at a moment when the superhero genre is facing increasing scrutiny and criticism. The dominance of superhero films and television series has led to concerns about the homogenization of popular culture, as studios prioritize familiar properties over original ideas. Spider-Noir offers a response to these concerns, demonstrating that superhero stories can be vehicles for genuine artistic expression when creators are given the freedom to take risks. The series' success suggests that audiences are hungry for innovation within the genre, that the fatigue many feel is not with superheroes themselves, but with the formulaic approach that has come to define their adaptation. The series also engages with contemporary political concerns, as its depiction of corruption and inequality resonates with current anxieties about the state of democratic institutions. The 1930s setting allows the series to address these concerns indirectly, using historical distance to make its critique more palatable while maintaining its relevance. This engagement with the present moment through the lens of the past is a hallmark of sophisticated genre work, and Spider-Noir executes it with considerable skill. The legacy of Spider-Noir is likely to be significant, as the series has already influenced discussions about the future of superhero media and inspired conversations about the possibilities of genre hybridity. The dual-format release strategy may prove to be a model for future productions, as it demonstrates that audiences appreciate having choices in how they experience a work. The casting of Nicolas Cage in a leading role may encourage other productions to consider unconventional choices, recognizing that the right actor can bring unexpected dimensions to familiar material. The series' success may also encourage studios to invest in period superhero stories, recognizing that the genre is not limited to contemporary settings. The The critical acclaim that greeted the series has established it as a benchmark for quality in superhero television, a standard against which future productions will be measured. These potential influences suggest that Spider-Noir is not merely an interesting experiment, but a potentially transformative work that could shape the direction of the genre for years to come. The relationship between Spider-Noir and the animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is worth exploring, as both works feature Nicolas Cage voicing a version of the character known as Spider-Man Noir. The animated version is a comedic supporting character, a parody of noir conventions who speaks in hard-boiled cliches and provides comic relief. The live-action version is radically different, a serious and tragic figure whose suffering is treated with gravity and respect. The connection between these two iterations creates an interesting tension, as audiences familiar with the animated version must adjust their expectations when encountering the live-action character. The showrunners have attempted to clarify that these are different versions of the character, but the connection remains significant, as it demonstrates the flexibility of the Spider-Man mythos and its capacity to accommodate radically different interpretations. The fact that Cage has now played both versions adds another layer of interest, as his performances invite comparison and contrast. The animated version's humor and the live-action version's tragedy represent two poles of the noir tradition, which has always contained both comic and tragic possibilities. The series' depiction of New York City is itself a significant achievement, as it creates a version of the city that is both historically accurate and mythologically resonant. The New York of Spider-Noir is a place of stark contrasts, where immense wealth exists alongside desperate poverty, where glamour and squalor coexist in uneasy proximity. The city's geography is used effectively, as different neighborhoods represent different moral worlds, from the corrupt halls of power to the desperate tenements of the poor. The series depicts the city as a character in its own right, a living entity that shapes the lives of its inhabitants and bears witness to their struggles. The attention to period detail extends beyond the visual to encompass the social and cultural dynamics of the era, as the series depicts the racial tensions, labor struggles, and political conflicts that define 1930s New York. This specificity grounds the fantastic elements of the narrative in a recognizable reality, making the supernatural horror more effective by contrast. The city of Spider-Noir is not merely a backdrop, but an essential element of the story, a world that feels fully realized and internally consistent. The series' treatment of trauma is particularly sophisticated, as it recognizes that psychological wounds do not heal according to any predictable timeline and that recovery is rarely complete. Riley's trauma is depicted as a constant presence in his life, shaping his perceptions, his relationships, and his choices in ways that he cannot fully control. The series refuses to suggest that his heroism represents a healthy processing of his trauma, instead depicting it as a compulsion that may itself be a symptom of his condition. Hardy's trauma is similarly persistent, as her experiences have taught her to mistrust everyone and to prioritize her own survival above all else. The series recognizes that such adaptations are survival mechanisms, that they developed for good reasons even if they now cause suffering. The depiction of trauma in Spider-Noir is notably free of the therapeutic optimism that characterizes much contemporary media, which tends to suggest that trauma can be overcome through the right combination of support and self-reflection. Instead, the series suggests that trauma is a permanent condition, that the best one can hope for is to learn to live with its effects. This honesty is refreshing and important, as it respects the experiences of those who have suffered rather than offering false comfort. The series' engagement with questions of masculinity is another dimension of its thematic complexity, as it depicts multiple versions of masculinity and explores their consequences. Riley's masculinity is wounded, as his condition has left him feeling less than fully human, and his retirement has stripped him of the heroic identity that once defined him. His vulnerability is a significant departure from traditional superhero masculinity, which tends to emphasize strength and stoicism above all else. Silvermane represents a toxic masculinity that has hardened into cruelty, as his pursuit of power has destroyed his capacity for empathy and connection. Robertson represents a different possibility, a masculinity grounded in principle and loyalty rather than dominance and control. Tombstone's pursuit of power through physical strength represents another version, one that ultimately proves self-destructive. The series does not offer a single model of healthy masculinity, but instead presents multiple possibilities, allowing the audience to draw their own conclusions. This treatment of gender is notably more sophisticated than most superhero media, which tends to reproduce conventional gender roles without examination. The political dimensions of Spider-Noir are significant, as the series engages with questions of power, justice, and resistance that are urgently relevant to the contemporary moment. The depiction of systemic corruption in 1930s New York resonates with current concerns about the influence of money in politics and the erosion of democratic institutions. The series suggests that individual heroism, however admirable, is insufficient to address the underlying conditions that create injustice, that systemic problems require systemic solutions. This message is delivered without didacticism, emerging organically from the narrative rather than being imposed upon it. The series also engages with questions of class, as the economic desperation of the Depression era is depicted with unflinching honesty. The contrast between the wealthy and the poor is a constant presence, reminding viewers of the inequalities that persist in our own time. The series' willingness to address these political questions distinguishes it from more escapist superhero entertainment, positioning it as a work that engages seriously with the world beyond its fictional boundaries. The writing of Spider-Noir deserves particular praise, as the dialogue achieves a hard-boiled poetry that is both period-appropriate and surprisingly contemporary. The voiceover narration is written with a literary quality that elevates it beyond mere exposition, as Riley's observations and reflections reveal a mind that is sharp, literate, and deeply weary. The dialogue between characters crackles with wit and tension, as each exchange reveals character while advancing the plot. The series avoids the trap of making all characters sound alike, instead giving each a distinctive voice that reflects their background, education, and personality. The humor is dark and understated, emerging from character and situation rather than being imposed through forced jokes. The writing demonstrates a deep understanding of the noir tradition while avoiding mere imitation, as the series uses the conventions of the genre to explore concerns that are distinctly contemporary. The quality of the writing is consistent across all 8 episodes, a testament to the skill of the writing room and the vision of the showrunners. The direction of Spider-Noir is similarly impressive, as the series maintains a consistent visual and tonal identity despite the involvement of multiple directors. Harry Bradbeer, known for his work on Fleabag, brings a sharp eye for character and a willingness to break conventional rules of framing and pacing. Nzinga Stewart contributes a sensitivity to the emotional dimensions of the story, ensuring that the characters remain human even amidst the most fantastic events. Alethea Jones brings energy and visual flair to the action sequences, making them feel kinetic and dangerous. Greg Yataines, with his extensive experience in television direction, provides the consistency that holds the series together across its various episodes. The collaboration between these directors and the showrunners has produced a series that feels unified despite the variety of sensibilities involved. The direction is particularly effective in the horror sequences, which generate genuine tension and unease through careful pacing and atmospheric composition. The action sequences are equally well directed, as the choreography emphasizes Riley's unnatural movement patterns and the chaotic violence of his fighting style. The editing of Spider-Noir contributes significantly to its effectiveness, as the pacing is carefully calibrated to maintain tension while allowing space for character development. The transitions between scenes are often abrupt, reflecting the fractured nature of Riley's consciousness and the chaos of the world he inhabits. The flashbacks are integrated seamlessly into the present-day narrative, providing context without disrupting the flow of the story. The editing is particularly effective in the horror sequences, where quick cuts and unexpected angles create a sense of disorientation that enhances the fear. The series also makes effective use of montage, particularly in sequences that depict the passage of time or the accumulation of evidence. The editing choices consistently serve the narrative and thematic purposes, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of how the manipulation of time and space can shape audience experience. The result is a series that feels both tightly constructed and expansive, as the editing creates a rhythm that carries the viewer through the story with increasing momentum. The costume design of Spider-Noir is another element that deserves attention, as it contributes significantly to the characterization and the period atmosphere. Ben Reilly's costumes reflect his status as a man who has fallen from grace, as his clothes are well-made but worn, suggesting a past prosperity that has faded. The spider costume itself is treated not as a superhero uniform, but as a practical necessity, something Riley wears to conceal his identity rather than to inspire fear or admiration. Kat Hardy's costumes are glamorous and revealing, reflecting her role as a performer and her strategic use of her sexuality. Silvermane's suits are immaculately tailored, conveying his wealth and power while his physical bearing suggests the threat beneath the civilized surface. The costumes of the supporting characters reflect their social positions, as the wealthy characters wear fine fabrics and the poor characters wear patched and mended clothing. This attention to costume detail grounds the characters in their social context, making the world of the series feel real and lived in. The costume design also contributes to the visual beauty of the series, as the period fashions create a striking aesthetic that distinguishes the show from contemporary superhero productions. The lighting of Spider-Noir is essential to its noir aesthetic, as the interplay of light and shadow creates the mood of moral ambiguity that defines the genre. The series employs hard lighting that creates sharp shadows, evoking the work of classic noir cinematographers who used light to reveal and conceal in equal measure. The use of Venetian blind shadows is a signature noir technique that the series employs effectively, as the bars of light suggest imprisonment and create visual interest in otherwise plain scenes. The nightclub sequences are lit with a smoky warmth that suggests both glamour and danger, as the beautiful surfaces conceal ugly truths. The horror sequences employ low-key lighting that leaves much of the frame in darkness, allowing the audience's imagination to supply the horrors that are not fully shown. The lighting consistently reinforces the thematic concerns of the series, using visual contrast to represent the moral complexity of the world. This integration of lighting and theme demonstrates the series' commitment to craft at every level of production. The series' treatment of hope is particularly interesting, as it offers a version of hope that is qualified and uncertain rather than triumphant and assured. Riley's return to heroism is not depicted as a triumphant redemption, but as a reluctant acceptance of an unavoidable duty, a choice made without expectation of success or recognition. The series suggests that hope is not the same as optimism, that one can act in the face of despair without believing that one's actions will ultimately succeed. This qualified hope is consistent with the noir tradition, which tends to be skeptical of happy endings and suspicious of easy resolutions. The series offers moments of genuine beauty and connection amidst the darkness, as the relationships between characters provide islands of warmth in a cold world. These moments are precious precisely because they are rare, as the series does not allow them to accumulate into a false sense of security. The ending of the series is consistent with this treatment of hope, as it offers a glimpse of possibility without promising that everything will be okay. This honesty about the limits of hope is one of the series' most mature qualities, as it respects the complexity of the world it depicts. The use of color in Spider-Noir is particularly noteworthy given the dual-format release, as the color version employs a carefully restricted palette that evokes the period setting, while the black and white version strips color entirely to heighten the noir atmosphere. The color version emphasizes browns, grays, and muted tones, avoiding bright colors that would break the period illusion. The occasional use of red, particularly in sequences involving violence, creates a striking contrast that draws attention to moments of significance. The black and white version is not simply a desaturated copy, but a carefully graded presentation that enhances the shadow detail and creates a silvery sheen that evokes classic noir cinematography. The availability of both versions allows viewers to choose the experience that best suits their preferences, and both versions are equally valid interpretations of the material. This dual presentation is unprecedented in television history and represents a significant innovation in how visual media can be distributed and experienced. The fact that both versions have been praised by critics demonstrates that the series works effectively in either presentation, a testament to the strength of the underlying visual design. The series' engagement with the horror genre is more sophisticated than many critics have acknowledged, as it uses horror elements not merely for shock value, but to explore deeper questions about the nature of humanity and the experience of alienation. The body horror sequences depicting Sandman's transformation and Riley's condition draw on a tradition that includes David Cronenberg's work, which uses physical transformation to explore psychological states. The mad scientist figure represents the fear of science without ethics, a concern that was particularly acute in the 1930s as eugenics and other pseudoscientific ideologies gained influence. The series suggests that the true horror is not the monsters themselves but the systems that create them, that the mad scientists and corrupt politicians are more frightening than any supernatural creature. This thematic use of horror distinguishes Spider-Noir from more conventional superhero media, which tends to use horror elements as mere decoration rather than as vehicles for serious exploration. The horror in Spider-Noir is integral to its meaning, as it forces the audience to confront uncomfortable truths about power, exploitation, and the fragility of the human body. The performances in Spider-Noir are uniformly excellent, as each actor brings depth and specificity to their role, creating characters who feel like real people rather than mere functions of the plot. Nicolas Cage's performance as Ben Reilly is the centerpiece, as he invests the character with a combination of vulnerability, intensity, and dark humor that makes him compelling even in his most problematic moments. Lamorne Morris brings warmth and integrity to Robbie Robertson, creating a character whose friendship with Riley feels genuine and earned. Jun Li's Kat Hardy is a revelation, as she balances the character's seductive exterior with an emotional depth that becomes increasingly apparent as the series progresses. Brendan Gleeson brings Shakespearean gravitas to Silvermane, creating a villain who is terrifying not because of his power, but because of his humanity. Jack Huston's Sandman is genuinely tragic, as he conveys the suffering beneath the monster's exterior. Abraham Papula's Tombstone is physically imposing and emotionally complex, as he portrays a man whose pursuit of respect has led him down a dark path. Karen Rodriguez's Janet Ruiz provides essential grounding, as her practical wisdom and dry humor offer relief from the darkness. The ensemble creates a world that feels populated by real people, each with their own history and motivations. The series' approach to storytelling is notably confident, as it trusts the audience to follow complex narratives without excessive exposition or hand-holding. The plot unfolds through a combination of present-day action and carefully deployed flashbacks, as the series reveals information gradually in ways that recontextualize earlier events. This approach rewards attentive viewing, as details that seem insignificant in early episodes take on new meaning as the story progresses. The series also trusts the audience to handle moral ambiguity, as it refuses to provide clear distinctions between heroes and villains, instead depicting characters whose actions are shaped by circumstances and whose motivations are rarely pure. This respect for the audience's intelligence is a hallmark of sophisticated television, and it distinguishes Spider-Noir from more conventional superhero productions that tend to spell everything out explicitly. The series demonstrates that audiences are capable of handling complexity, that they do not need to be told what to think or how to feel. This confidence in the audience is one of the series' most admirable qualities. The world-building of Spider-Noir is subtle and effective, as the series creates a fully realized alternative version of 1930s New York without resorting to excessive exposition or information dumps. The details of this world are conveyed through visual storytelling, as the production design, costumes, and locations communicate the social and economic conditions of the era. The series assumes that audiences have some familiarity with the historical period, allowing it to focus on the specific elements that distinguish this world from our own. The presence of superpowered individuals is treated matter-of-factly, as though such beings are simply another element of the strange world of the 1930s. The series does not attempt to explain every aspect of its world, recognizing that mystery is often more effective than explanation. This restraint is a sign of confidence, as the creators trust that audiences will accept the world they have created without demanding that every question be answered. The result is a world that feels real and lived in, a place where the fantastic and the mundane coexist in uneasy balance. The series' treatment of loneliness is particularly affecting, as it depicts characters who are isolated by their circumstances and their choices, unable to connect with others in meaningful ways. Riley's loneliness is existential, as his condition has set him apart from ordinary humanity in ways that cannot be bridged. Hardy's loneliness is strategic, as her survival depends on maintaining emotional distance from everyone around her. Robertson's loneliness is professional, as his position as a black journalist in a racist industry has taught him to rely on himself rather than on colleagues who might betray him. Even Silvermane is lonely, as his power has isolated him from genuine human connection, replacing relationships with transactions. The series suggests that loneliness is a fundamental condition of modern life, that the structures of society conspire to keep people apart even as they live in close proximity. This theme is particularly resonant in the present moment, as concerns about social isolation and the decline of community have become increasingly prominent. The series offers glimpses of connection as moments of genuine beauty, suggesting that such moments are precious precisely because they are rare. The moral complexity of Spider-Noir is one of its defining features, as the series refuses to provide easy answers to the ethical questions it raises. The characters are neither purely good nor purely evil, but are instead defined by the choices they make in circumstances that offer no clean options. Riley's vigilantism is both admirable and problematic, as his methods sometimes cause harm even as they seek to prevent greater harm. Hardy's compromises are understandable given her circumstances, but the series does not pretend that they are without moral cost. Robertson's pursuit of his career sometimes conflicts with his obligations to his community, forcing him to make choices that have no clearly right answer. Even Silvermane is given moments of humanity, as the series reveals the experiences that shaped him into the monster he has become. This moral complexity is a hallmark of the noir tradition, which has always been skeptical of simple moral categories. The series honors this tradition while also engaging with contemporary ethical concerns, creating a work that feels both timeless and relevant. The pacing of Spider-Noir is carefully calibrated to maintain tension while allowing space for character development and thematic exploration. The 8-episode structure provides enough room for the story to unfold gradually, as each episode builds upon the previous one while introducing new elements that complicate the central narrative. The series avoids the trap of padding its runtime with unnecessary subplots, as every narrative thread contributes to the overall arc. The pacing varies across episodes, as some focus on action and others on character development, but the series maintains a consistent momentum that carries the viewer through to the conclusion. The use of cliffhangers is judicious, as each episode ends with a revelation or development that creates anticipation for the next installment without resorting to cheap manipulation. The pacing is particularly effective in the final episodes, as the various threads converge in a climax that feels earned and satisfying. The series demonstrates that patient storytelling can be as engaging as constant action, that the slow build of tension can be more effective than immediate gratification. The series' treatment of memory is another sophisticated element, as it explores the ways in which the past shapes the present and the unreliability of recollection. Riley's memories of his transformation are fragmented and traumatic, returning to him in flashes that are both revealing and distorting. The flashback structure of the series reflects this fragmentation, as the audience pieces together the full picture of Riley's past alongside the character himself. The series suggests that memory is not a reliable record of the past, but a reconstruction shaped by present concerns and emotional states. This treatment of memory adds another layer of complexity to the narrative, as the audience must question whether the flashbacks they see are accurate representations of what happened or distorted versions filtered through Riley's trauma. The series uses this unreliability effectively, as revelations in later episodes force viewers to reconsider what they thought they knew. This engagement with the nature of memory distinguishes Spider-Noir from more conventional storytelling, which tends to treat flashbacks as transparent windows into the past. The production values of Spider-Noir are notably high, as the series demonstrates a commitment to quality that is evident in every frame. The budget is clearly substantial, allowing for elaborate period sets, detailed costumes, and sophisticated visual effects that serve the narrative without overwhelming it. The visual effects are used judiciously, as the series relies on practical effects and physical performance whenever possible, reserving digital effects for moments that genuinely require them. This restraint is a sign of confidence, as the creators trust that the performances and production design can carry the weight of the story without constant digital enhancement. The sound design is equally sophisticated, creating an auditory environment that complements the visual storytelling. The music is particularly effective, as the jazz-influenced score evokes the period while maintaining a contemporary edge. These production values demonstrate that the series was made with care and attention, that the creators were committed to realizing their vision fully rather than cutting corners. The series' relationship to the broader Spider-Man mythology is complex and interesting, as it draws on familiar elements while transforming them in ways that serve its unique vision. The name Ben Reilly is itself a reference to a clone of Peter Parker from the comics, a choice that immediately signals the series' interest in questions of identity and authenticity. The absence of Peter Parker from this universe is significant, as it allows the series to explore the Spider-Man archetype without the burden of comparison to the more familiar iteration. The villains are drawn from Spider-Man's rogues gallery, but reimagined in ways that suit the noir aesthetic, as Sandman becomes a horror figure and Tombstone becomes a tragic product of systemic racism. The series also incorporates elements from the larger Spider-Verse mythology, as the concept of multiple versions of Spider-Man is implicit in its very existence. This engagement with the source material is respectful without being slavish, as the series honors the legacy of Spider-Man while creating something genuinely new. The emotional impact of Spider-Noir is considerable, as the series earns its moments of pathos through careful character development and narrative investment. The relationships between characters are developed over time, allowing the audience to care about their fates when the narrative takes its darkest turns. The friendship between Riley and Robertson is particularly affecting, as their mutual loyalty is tested by the dangers they face and the compromises they are forced to make. The romance between Riley and Hardy is equally affecting, as their connection is forged in adversity and tested by circumstances beyond their control. The series does not manipulate the audience with cheap sentiment, instead allowing the emotional impact to emerge organically from the characters and situations. This restraint makes the emotional moments more powerful when they arrive, as they feel earned rather than imposed. The series demonstrates that genuine emotion can coexist with genre sophistication, that a work can be both intellectually stimulating and emotionally moving. The cultural significance of Spider-Noir extends beyond its immediate entertainment value, as the series contributes to ongoing conversations about the state of popular culture and the possibilities of genre fiction. The series demonstrates that superhero stories can be vehicles for serious artistic expression, challenging the assumption that the genre is inherently juvenile or escapist. The series also demonstrates that period settings can be used to explore contemporary concerns, as its depiction of 1930s corruption resonates with current anxieties about institutional failure. The casting of Nicolas Cage, an actor whose career has been defined by risk-taking and unconventional choices, signals the series' commitment to originality over safety. The dual-format release represents an innovation in distribution that may influence future productions. These contributions suggest that Spider-Noir is not merely an entertaining series, but a significant cultural artifact, a work that participates in and shapes the ongoing evolution of popular entertainment. The series' treatment of violence against women is notably careful, as it acknowledges the reality of such violence without exploiting it for shock value. Hardy's experiences have clearly included encounters with violence and exploitation, but the series does not dwell on these experiences or use them as cheap motivation. The violence in the series is directed at characters regardless of gender, as the noir world is depicted as equally dangerous for everyone. The series recognizes that women in the 1930s faced particular vulnerabilities, as their legal and social status left them exposed to various forms of exploitation. Hardy's survival strategies are depicted as rational responses to these conditions, as she uses the tools available to her to protect herself in a world that offers little protection. This treatment of gendered violence is sophisticated and respectful, as the series acknowledges the reality of the threat without sensationalizing it. The result is a portrayal of female experience that feels honest and grounded, avoiding both the exploitation and the erasure that characterize many depictions of women in genre fiction.